and get our minds into something so that we can concentrate and have our minds open and let the Spirit move. Many of you will know that Elizabeth Clark was a part of this group. If you're Anglican, she was a great Methodist, but we're just mindful of Elizabeth for all the wisdom and advocacy that she did in her time as National Rural Officer, and ecumenically as well. So in order to sort of get ourselves into the zone, as it were, I'm going to read the poem I Wandered Lonely as a Cloud by William Wordsworth. Just a reminder that it is not contemporary language, and so some of the words have modern connotations, so don't misconstrue them. I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats on high valleys and vales and hills, when all at once I saw a cloud, a host of golden daffodils, beside the lake, beneath the trees, fluttering and dancing in the breeze. Continuous as the stars that shine and twinkle on the Milky Way, they stretched in never-ending line along the margin of a bay. 10,000 saw I at a glance, tossing their heads in sprightly dance. The waves beside them danced, but they outdid the sparkling waves in glee. A poet could not but be gay in such a jocund company. I gazed and gazed, but little thought what wealth the show to me had brought. For oft when on my couch I lie, in vacant or in pensive mood, they flash upon that inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude. And then my heart with pleasure fills and dances with the daffodils. So, Lord, we offer this time together, the experiences and the context in which we work and move. We give thanks for creation and for all that we can learn from it. We pray that your Spirit may move within us and guide us and inspire us. In the name of Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. So I hand over to Lorraine, who's going to guide us further.
Thank you very much. So hello to everybody. Those of you who don't know me, my name is Lorraine Brown. I'm a Methodist deacon and have a lot of interests in rural living, and I have a position of Peak Park Rural Development Enabler, and was one of the founder members of this organisation that we've got now, this Positively Rural. My role this afternoon is to be able to introduce you and to welcome our speakers. Two wonderful women with us this afternoon that I have great privilege of being mentored by over my journey with green care and how it can affect health in all people. So I'm delighted to welcome both Dr. Debbie Clayton and Dr. Jenny Mercer. Dr. Jenny Mercer is a principal lecturer and a reader at Cardiff Metropolitan University. She has conducted numerous evaluations of green care type or style projects covering areas such as allotment and community gardening, of gardening for isolated older people with mental ill health, of care farming, ecotherapy, and the therapeutic potential of dogs in prisons. She is a keen outdoor person and enjoys walking the Pembrokeshire coastal path with her two terriers. We're delighted to have you with us today, Jenny. And along with Jenny is Dr. Debbie Clayton. Dr. Debbie Clayton is a principal lecturer at Cardiff Metropolitan University. She has taught students in applied psychology from undergraduate to PhD level. Debbie's research focuses on the role of the natural environment for health and well-being. She's particularly interested in working with community groups that encourage people to engage in outdoor activities or involve interaction with nature, such as cycling, gardening, or care farming. These activities may offer positive benefits for our cognitive, functional, physical health and psychological well-being. So welcome to you both. Sadly today we don't have Lindsay with us, who was going to be joining us. Dr. Lindsay Corduroy-Bruce has unfortunately experienced a bereavement and is unable to join us today. So our thoughts are with Lindsay and we hope she will be able to join us at a later date. So all that remains would be for me to hand over to Debbie. Hello, Debbie, and let's hear what you have to say to us. Thank you.
So yeah, if it's okay for the slides to be presented, that would be great. Thank you very much. Okay, so what I wanted to talk about today was about green care in general, and generally what we know about why the natural environment and how the natural environment might help our health and well-being. So go next slide. So just to ask you a question, just to have a think for a moment. Here's a definition of something that's known as therapeutic landscapes. So certain localities have an attraction which gives a certain indefinable sense of well-being and which you want to return to time and time again. So just take a moment to think about, I'm sure you love where you exactly are right now looking at this screen. But if you could be somewhere else, where would that be? If you could just use a kind of, for any Star Trek fans, a kind of way of transporting yourself to somewhere else, where would that place be? So just give you a minute to think about that and maybe transport yourself in your mind to that place. Okay, so just thinking about where you were then and think about what the environment was like, what is your ideal place? And if we move to the next slide, you can see some of my ideal places. So the reason I'm showing you those is to show the different types of environments that are important to me and give me a sense of well-being. And that the link and the tie there sometimes is the sort of emotional connection you have and the experiences you've had in those places. But one of the things that is common amongst many of those places is this extent of view and this naturalness of the environment. Some of them are urban and city environments, but many of them are natural environments with a view and an extent of a view. And we know from research that people have a sort of generally a natural preference for scenes that have a rural or a natural environment. So when we ask people to rate the beauty of different pictures and scenes and places, we find that people generally give higher ratings of beauty to natural environments as compared to man-made or urban environments. So just showing you a couple of examples here. I mean, the city environment there is quite beautiful, but people would tend to rate the natural environment as more beautiful. The question is, why would that be? So there are a number of theories about this, what it is that why we are attracted to these spaces. So one of the theories is an evolutionary theory, which would suggest we might have an adaptive preference, perhaps, for a grand view of the landscape with potential resources, or because it provides us with a refuge from danger or threats. Another theory would be related to our natural affinity with animals. This is called biophilia. So this idea that humans have an innately emotional affiliation to other living organisms. And so when we think about the amount of people who like watching wildlife programs, the amount of people when you're out for a walk and you see wildlife and how you feel about that and how that makes you feel, And also the amount of us who really value having companion animals, pets in our lives. You see, we have this natural sort of affinity with living organisms. So that's one set of theories. If we move on to the next slide. So another theoretical perspective thinks about our cognitive load, or the amount of pressure that we put ourselves under in our daily lives and the way that we live our daily lives. So many of us now are multitasking, managing lots of different things in our lives, whether that be our family, our work, our relationships, our social lives, lots of different things coming into us at the same time. And quite often we spend a lot of our time directing our attention. So we're forced to direct our attention, many people, to sort of a computer screen or a piece of text, or even when we're out and about, we're directing our attention to make sure we don't, we cross the road safely, and making sure we're really taking a lot of time focusing on what we're doing. So research has suggested that we get this, what's called directed attention fatigue, which if we have this overload of information, overload of tasks, and we really, some of you may be able to relate to this feeling where you've just got too many things on your plate at the same time. This can lead to problems with difficulty concentrating, irritability, increased errors, and just a general feeling of overwhelmness. So it's been suggested that perhaps nature has a beneficial role, and it helps us restore from that stress. So, and the way that it might do this is in 4 different ways, according to attention restoration theory. So being away from routine, being in an environment that allows soft fascination. So instead of directing your attention, you're just naturally drawn to things that you don't need to look at, but are interesting to look at. And that the natural environment tends to have an extensive view rather than a closed view, and that the natural environment allows us to do things that are compatible with our health and well-being. So the evidence suggests that by being in this natural environment and taking breaks away from that directed attention, this can help us with being more productive, decreasing our errors, improving our levels of stress, and increasing happiness. For example, research has shown that there are benefits for all of those psychological and physiological measures. Research has also shown, for example, walking in a natural environment can decrease blood pressure. Other benefits, though, that are really interesting are that being out in a natural environment can boost creativity and increase prosocial behaviour, which are probably a little bit less well known about, but just having that time and space to, rather than directing your attention for your mind to wander, can have those benefits too. So next slide. So just thinking about those physical benefits then, and some of the applications of this, a study which was done quite a while ago now, which really led to the start of this research area, done by Ulrich in 1984, identified some differences in outcomes for patients in the clinical setting. So they identified that patients who were in the same ward but had different views had different outcomes. So some patients had a view of nature out of the window, and some had just a view of the brick wall. And they found that those who had the view of nature recovered from in this case, gallbladder surgery in a more positive way. So they took fewer painkillers, they stayed for one less day than compared to the other group, and received fewer negative evaluations in terms of their experience in the ward. Okay, next slide. So this type of research led to an interest in what we could do about this and how we could use this in a more of a community setting. And this term green care was developed, which encompasses a number of different ways that we can use the natural environment in terms of way to support people. So you can see here we've got social and therapeutic horticulture, so encouraging people to get involved in gardening, animal assisted intervention. So in the introduction, Lorraine talked about a study we've done looking at dogs in prisons. I know Lorraine has run care farming interventions, so she can talk a lot about that. Green exercise, so just any form of exercise outdoors. It could be cycling, walking, or using an outdoor gym. Ecotherapy, so using therapeutics, traditional psychological therapeutic tools alongside, for example, mindfulness walking would be an example of ecotherapy. And then wilderness therapy. So these are therapies you may have seen programs on the TV. There's been a few, largely in America, where people are taken out to the wilderness, and they tend to involve younger people doing sort of activities that stretch them and challenge them. So it's a slightly different type of intervention. So those are the range of different activities that come under green care. So if we could go to the next slide. So what have we been looking at? We've been looking at various different things. I'll just talk about a couple of them now. So one of them is looking at allotment gardening. So we did a study to see, well, okay, there's some suggestions that gardening might help with your stress, but there wasn't at that time any real solid evidence that that was the case. So we started off by just comparing groups of over 50s who volunteered and selected themselves into a range of different kinds of activities. So this first graph here with the green bars shows the levels of stress that people felt after the intervention. And so the first bar there, the highest bar, is the levels of stress for those in the indoor exercise group. Second bar for those who went on health walks. The third bar is for those who took part in allotment gardening. And the fourth bar is those who were gardening in their own home. And so as you can see, the levels of stress for allotment gardeners was significantly lower than the other groups. So this gave us an indication. It was just people who'd selected in, so it was a cross-sectional study. Just gave us an indication that actually allotment gardening may be related to lower levels of stress. So then we did a sort of more controlled study, an intervention where we asked people to volunteer into the study, and then they were allocated to either allotment gardening or community gardening, or they were on a wait list. So they were waiting to get an allotment. So this bar with this graph with the green, the orange and the blue bars shows how their levels of stress changed over the time of the period involved in these activities. So you can see the first three bars there show that allotment gardeners' stress lowered slightly over the intervention. Community gardening lowered the stress to a greater degree than allotment gardening. And for those poor people who were waiting for their allotment, who really wanted to have an allotment but couldn't get one, their stress in that same period of time increased. So this gives us some indication that being involved in gardening generally is good for lowering your stress levels. And this was in a year where it rained a lot. Very different summer to this summer. It was a really, really rainy summer. So even with that in the mix, we still got some positive benefits particularly for community gardening. So then next slide, please. In addition to the sort of what we call the more quantitative and the measures that we use in terms of measuring stress through questionnaires, we also did some interviews with the participants to sort of try and draw out what the benefits of allotment gardening were. And we found that there were some two key themes to this. It was about what you were doing in that activity and where you were. So being in that allotment landscape was really important. And this ties in with that attention restoration theory, that being away, that being outdoors and being in the natural environment, that was really important. But the doing was also important, seeing gardening as working, sharing expertise, producing produce, having that sense of achievement. And those two things combined together seem to give this sense of escape and enjoyment, led to stress reduction and relaxation. So this sort of being in that place and having that sense of purpose and creativity seem to be a really, really good combination for people. Next slide. So this is a study, I thought I'd just share a finding from a study from another group, Milligan, in 2004, just to highlight, there is a range of benefits that they found from communal gardening, including emotional, social and sense of achievement, same as in our study. If we just click the next point, we do need to be aware and be cautious of some things, thinking about this quote. In my absence, Fred filled my prepared flower beds with plants from his garden, which was most disappointing. He wasn't there to see my shocked face, so I started to clear a new plot and make it ready for planting, so I could put in plants of my own choice. So we can see for some, they like that community and sharing and everyone in it together. For others, they want to create something that's very planned out and they want to have full control of their own plot in terms of a garden. So we do need to be aware of those different priorities that people have when we're thinking about these kinds of activities. Okay, next slide. So just to sum up, why might green care be beneficial? That getting people out into the outdoors, being active, being social, being involved in activities seems to have a range of benefits. You've got the physical activity, which we know people rate as being easier when you're outdoors. You've got that sense of space, which we know people rate as being more beautiful, the natural environment. We know that people like to care for animals and escape from the everyday environment. And there's this key benefit with gardening, particularly, of being involved with the seasons and feeling that real connection with the environment around you. But there's also opportunities in these activities to be creative, develop a sense of responsibility, increase self-esteem, and to provide an opportunity, depending on the activity, for either individual or group social support. Okay, so next slide. I think that was the end. So that's my brief summary of the benefits of green care. So thank you so much for listening. I hope I've kept to, I think we agreed 20 minutes.
Thank you very, very much indeed. That was, well, I like to see the little bit of Welsh there, Diolch yn fawr.
Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you very much. It was just lovely to hear that. And I found it particularly interesting. I know there are people here today who are already involved in some work similar, and I'm sure they found that fascinating too. But we'll find out. They're going to go into breakout rooms now. Catherine is going to put us into breakout rooms. I think she's looking at a few groups, maybe 4 or 5 groups. When you're in your rooms, can we just ask that you listen and contribute with respect? Ensure that only one voice is spoken at a time. Monitor your own airspace, giving everyone the opportunity to speak. Please remember, some people may be joining by phone. I'm not sure if there are or not today. Catherine will perhaps tell us in a moment. Disclose stories appropriately, and following the webinar today, share only non-attributal learning and good practice. But just a reminder, we're all adults, we do this often, so enjoy your breakout groups, and we look forward to talking to you in a moment. 10 minutes. So hello and welcome back. I hope you found that short break quite useful, beneficial. We're going to go on to our second presentation now, which is by Jenny, and I'm going to hand over to you straight away, Jenny.
Lovely, thanks very much, Lorraine. Welcome all. So we're going to move from what Debbie was talking about, the sort of the generic overview of green care, to a specific project and intervention that we are currently evaluating, which is an ecotherapy programme run by Mercer Wildlife Trust. So as an introduction to this, I thought it'd be quite useful to show you just a short video of where this ecotherapy site is, what they do, so you get a bit more of a sense of that space and what it looks like, rather than me talking about a slide about it. So if we could show the first video, that'd be great, thanks.
The Wild Skills, Wild Spaces project is a really fun project. It's funded by Welsh Government. It's in partnership with Paris Teaching and Health Board and Cardiff Metropolitan University. It's an ecotherapy programme that Montgomeryshire Wildlife Trust deliver out on our nature reserves. The project gives people the opportunity to learn new things that they may never have done before.
Lots of activities that are therapeutic and outdoors basically, so anything to do with nature. We do lots of whittling, a lot of green woodwork, lots of crafts, anything that's got like a kind of therapeutic outcome. And we take anyone who is 11 up and we just join people together outside and get them to enjoy each other's company and enjoy nature really.
Do you enjoy coming to the Wild Skills, Wild Spaces sessions?
Yes, I have. It's helped improve my anxiety loads.
Gets you out working with nature and it feels good. You're doing something positive. It's really good.
I'd say it's great for mental health in terms of just, it's relaxing, it's calm. Just, I know, getting your hands dirty and stuff, it's good.
It's definitely helped me a lot. I can do things that I wouldn't have done, and I could deal with people a lot better.
I like coming to these sessions because it gets me out of the house, which is my safe place really. So, and it gives me a positive environment to come out around like-minded people and just have fun, have a laugh, and learn stuff as well. So it's given me a push in a direction I didn't really expect, but I'm very happy and I'm enjoying it every single bit.
Lovely, thanks. So hopefully that contextualises the project a little before we start looking at the slides. So could we have the first slide, please? As you already got a sense, Wild Skills, Wild Spaces is an ecotherapy programme. Myself and Debbie are part of the research team that are evaluating this. And we've got everybody on the team because on this slide, because I have to say that Paul Sellers, who is our research assistant, is actually the person that does most of the work on this. They might sort of wheel myself and Debbie out to events like this to talk about it, but it is really Paul that is doing most of the work, and Professor Diane Crone then leads the centre. I should have said as well, you might have noticed there were subtitles on that video. That was the Welsh translation, and Cawr, which if you look at the title, Centre for Health and Activity and Wellbeing Research, Cawr doesn't actually, it misses out a few words, don't they? But Cawr is actually Welsh for a giant. So I think there was some trying to get some double meaning in there when setting up the study. We've contextualized it in terms of getting a sense of the space and what it looks like. But I think it's quite important, if we could have the next slide, please, thanks, to contextualize some of the areas that this particular project is looking at. I know in the title of today's seminar, we talk, I think it says about mental health and well-being and the role of green care in that. But I think, I don't know if you've ever noticed, but often mental health and well-being are used interchangeably, which can be problematic. And typically, when people are talking about mental health, they're actually talking about mental ill health, hence me putting mental ill health there. So if we perhaps look at some of the evidence that around some of these different areas. So the ONS nationally reported, as you can see, that approximately 50% of the UK population have some sort of long-standing health problem, most common of which are allergy, high blood pressure, low back disorder, and depression. So when trying to enhance health and well-being or mental ill health, there's quite a range of different areas to consider there, aren't there? Taking a Welsh perspective, because this is a Welsh study then, prior to COVID, The Wales Fiscal Analysis Survey found that 11.7 people of Welsh people suffered with mental health issues, and it's been suggested that the pandemic has further exacerbated this. So if we're talking about mental ill health, we're actually not talking about the whole of the population, are we? And I think this is an important part to make. When we're talking about enhancing people's mental health, we then perhaps could be talking about a wider population. But perhaps worryingly, that individuals that have been could you go back one, please? Individuals who have been diagnosed with a mental health disorder, actually, according to the World Health Organization, have been stated at being risk of dying 20 years younger than the general population. So clearly that there is an important role to be done in addressing and trying to alleviate people that are living with some sort of mental ill health condition. And similarly, average ratings of well-being using the ONS survey have actually continued to deteriorate across all indicators. But like mental health and mental ill health, I think well-being has become a little bit of an overused word, and also linked to the wellness industry. So, I mean, when I was given a training recently on what well-being is, I just did a Google image and looked up some images. And if we could move the slide on now, thanks. When we talk about well-being, we're talking about things like sometimes about going to health and beauty spas, aren't we? And how that can enhance our well-being. And then the next one, please. And did you know you could actually enhance your well-being? I'm sure many of you have heard of craft beer, but you can actually have sparkling craft water, which can enhance your well-being. So, there we go. Watermelon lemongrass seems to be the exciting cure there for you. So again, we see how this well-being industry, if you like, has become quite commercialized. And finally, I think one of the most bizarre ones I find, which is on the next sheet, is you could even give your cat grain-free food, which will enhance your cat's well-being. So it's, whilst obviously, I'm saying this tongue in cheek, I think it is quite important that we establish what it is we're talking about and what we're dealing with when we're using such terms. So on the next slide then, I offer a definition, and this is how, in the context of this particular piece of research, we are viewing well-being and mental health. So we take the World Health Organization's definition that an individual with good mental health and well-being can be described as someone who realizes their own abilities, can cope with the normal stresses of life, and can work productively and is able to contribute to their community. So something like a project that learns skills, that you're out in a natural environment, that you're coming together with other people, can help people in developing some of these areas. Hence the focus on well-being and mental health of this project. You might be thinking, okay, but what's that got to do with nature? Well, a term you may or may not be aware of is social prescription. So social prescription, as it says there, also sometimes known as community referral, aims to support individuals to take greater control of their own health as a means of enabling health and care professionals to refer people to a range of non-clinical services. So it's actually a shift, I guess, for, I'll take an example of your GP, to not just medicalize somebody's condition and perhaps give them some antidepressants or some sort of medication, but to actually prescribe them something that's more socially based. So one of the local interventions in our area around Cardiff is a walking group that people can be referred to. People with obesity problems can be referred actually to Slimming World as well, or you could be referred to the gym, all of which where you would have reduced fees or a series of classes paid for you. But as you can get a sense from this, social prescription is a much more holistic approach and takes this view that people's health is determined by both social, economic and environmental factors, and that if we're going to address people's ill health and well-being, we can't just medicalize things, but we need also to get them to engage in some sort of social activity that doctors and health can literally write a prescription and send people. So in linking with social prescription, then, nature on prescription is something that would be an example of social prescription. So this involves socially prescribed activities, focus on exposure to nature, such as the wild skills, wild spaces that programme that we're now evaluating. Again, a whole gamut of things that could come under this: conservation, bushcraft, care farming, creative activities, green woodwork, horticultural gardening. All these sort of things can come under this idea of doing something in nature that you could actually be prescribed to an intervention or a group. And as we know, and as Debbie has eloquently outlined to us initially, overall exposure to nature is viewed to have positive benefits for health and well-being, which is great. So to talk in a little bit more detail about WSWS, then, the project itself the aim was to deliver and evaluate an ecotherapy programme that seeks, as we've seen in the initial introductory video, to improve the health, skills and well-being of local communities in Montgomeryshire. So it's Montgomeryshire Wildlife that actually deliver the programme. So they got funding from the Welsh Government and were able to employ a team of skilled individuals to deliver the green care projects. And this is the social prescription or nature prescription bit. Participants are referred via the NHS or other health and social care partners and schools. So to give you some examples of who the referrals might be, so one of the schools was an alternative mainstream school. The NHS empowers Teaching Health Board, their community and mental health facility referred. Mind, the mental health support services there referred. Adult and disabilities team as part of Powys County Council referred. And I don't know if you picked up, but one of the staff in the video was saying anybody from 11 up can be referred onto this particular team. As we've already established, and we're doing the evaluation, and the project length is 24 months, so it's 2 years. It finishes in April 2023. So their logo is there, Wild Skills, Wild Spaces. It's one of these slides we're frame with bits coming across. I think it is only 2 clicks. Oh, it's 3 clicks actually. Thank you. So there are some pictures again of the location. A wide range, as you can see, of activities that are done within these different locations, and as well as developing the specific skills integral in doing all these things like woodwork, plant identification, bushcraft skills. These actually are a conduit, I would say, to some of the therapeutic with a small t benefits, like the social interaction, the getting out of the house, the talking to others, the raising self-esteem, having a sense of purpose, all these different things which are going to have positive impact on well-being and mental ill health, or certain types of mental ill health. So the programs run, they've got a number of iterations, as you can see there, for 12 weeks, and participants are invited to come along for a weekly session that lasts 2.5 hours. If you go to the next slide, that's great, thanks. So why does this need to be evaluated, and why do we need to bring in a team from a university? The evaluation was actually part of the funding. I don't know if any of you in your roles have been involved in getting funding to do things like the National Lottery is another quite a big pot of money that often fund projects. But very often now, evaluation is part of this process, not just to show to the funders the impact of this. It's very important for organisations to be able to evaluate what they're doing in a coherent and systematic fashion, to evidence, hopefully, that things work, but also then to make an argument for further funding. So we myself and Debbie have been involved in quite a lot of these projects for those reasons. So our evaluation is what's called a mixed methods approach. So we've got survey approaches, so these would be quantitative, so literally numbers to measure, pre and post, so before the intervention starts and then after 12 weeks. And the 3 key scales that are used there, as you can see, are connectedness to nature, a wellbeing scale, and physical activity. So we're seeking to find out, as a result of doing this and as part of this, have physical activity levels gone up? Has wellbeing improved? Are people more connected to nature? And it might be actually, I mean, Debbie made the important point earlier when talking about community gardens, that it's not for everybody. It might be that people actually were quite connected to nature before they started. And it might be that such an intervention such as this is actually very useful for people who are connected to nature. Or it might be we find out quite the opposite, that people weren't particularly connected to nature, and this has really enhanced them, all of which are really useful findings in terms of developing interventions and establishing who interventions are best placed to work for and who to work with. Then we have our qualitative data, so the actual, the words, the spoken word of people. And so the participants were interviewed at the end of each iteration to find out, how was it for you? How did you experience what was going on? We also done some interviews and focus groups with the referrers, so those organisations that are referring their clients into these services, because they are really important stakeholders, and if they don't see this as a useful thing, then they're not going to be referring people in the future. And then finally, of course, integral to these projects working are the instructors. And they are hands-on every day working on this project. So they've got really important observations about what's going on and how, what the key indicators are for the success or not of the project. So we can have the next slide, please. Thanks. So I mentioned it was a 2-year project. So by the end of the first year, so April 2021, 4 of the programmes, 4 12-week iterations had been completed. There were 2 adult groups and 2 young person groups. So this equates to 48 sessions and 120 hours of delivery time. Interestingly, the young people had a better completion rate, as you can see, at 85% than the adult referrers. Sorry, I think it's again one of these flying things. You just click once more. Sorry, Catherine. Then currently there's another 5 iterations going on. So by the end of April 2021, there would have been over 11 iterations of these with various groups of individuals. Now, in terms of outcomes, then. Here are just some quotes from the end of the first year and what some of the individuals told us about how they found the experience. These are just people participating in it, not the people referrers of that. So as you can see, some of these top person there, top left, just being out here has been an amazing experience. I'd absolutely recommend it to anyone who's got mental health issues, absolutely. In the middle there, the people make you feel invited, welcomed, warm. There's no room for being anxious because it's just a very positive environment. So you can just put these anxieties and things aside and just enjoy the time that you're here for. Certainly in my experience of working on projects like this, the people involved, people that run it really are integral. I mean, Lorraine didn't say at the beginning, but we first started working with Lorraine because we were doing an evaluation at the care farm that Lorraine was director, and Lorraine really sort of personifies this. These strong personalities that just ooze enthusiasm and really drive things. And when we were doing the initial design of this study, the team working on here again just really oozed that sort of thing. I think there seems to be a real passion amongst people that are interested in these sort of areas. So again, another participant, the last couple of years have been really difficult. This has given me my life back. It really has. I mean that. I mean, that's a really powerful phrase, isn't it? This has just given me my life back. I mean, I think that they are talking about COVID as well in the last couple of years. And finally, it's absolutely fantastic. I love it. The leaders are being talked about here, are so welcoming and warm and passionate and enthusiastic. They're really patient and understanding, because I've had a bit of trouble getting out, being depressed and anxious, and the pandemic has been really, really hard. So the initial feedback we're getting is very similar to this and is very positive. I can't share with you any of the quantitative data yet because we need to get all the pre and post for all the iterations to have a big enough sample size. But the next slide shows us sort of where we are currently with that evaluation. So in 2021, the data collection started with the participants. We had a number of meetings and updates, both with Paul visiting the site and via technology to discuss with the team how it was going. Largely, I think it's worth noting that the data was collected by those working on the intervention, which I think was really, really important in terms of they had the trust, they had the relationship with the individuals. I mean, if you go something, I'm going to be really stereotypical here, but when I say I'm a psychologist, I get people either go, "Oh, psychology is really, really interesting, isn't it?" And I want you to talk about psychology, which actually, having been in it for 30 years, that it's not that interesting to me, or they will just shut up and go, oh no, you're analysing me, aren't you? You're going to read my mind, as if I've got some magic power to see into their head, and which absolutely I haven't, and I wish I could, but I really can't. So so going and saying, oh yeah, we're a psychologist, we work in a university, we might not actually be best placed to actually go and collect that data. And we worked a lot in sort of the co-development of what would work, what wouldn't, and how with the team. And again, they've been great in delivering the project for us, really, in many ways. So in early 22, we did expand the interviews, not just to participants, to the referrers and the deliverers. We've got the data collection going on, the quantitative one, and have an initial data analysis and results. So in April, at the end of the first year, we had to write and present to the Wildlife Trust the first year evaluation report, which happy to share with you if anybody is interested in reading this. And then for the final part, then we'll be continuing with the data analysis. Obviously writing the results are very important in terms of will be part of the report to the Welsh Government, the funders, about the recommendations for policy and practice. Dissemination is really important in sort of public forums such as this. Also, we've presented at a health psychology conference and a European conference on public health in September, and also to rural practitioners at the Royal Welsh Showground in Mid Wales, at what's called the Smallholder Show. So exciting stuff, and good to see it working, because that often as a researcher is always a worry, that you work with these amazing, really enthusiastic people, but actually you have to be objective, and if things aren't working, that is what you have to be saying. And if you feel, I don't know, it's just doing more harm, then these are some of the findings that you need to be giving, but nothing like that on there. So my final slide, though, I've sort of said how amazing this all is, and of course it is, but let's not kid ourselves. Setting up such projects are challenging. So at the end there, it says unforeseen challenges. Of course, the biggest unforeseen challenge, which probably everybody has had to deal with, is a global pandemic. So originally this funding was for 3 years and due to start in April 2020, would it be? And the pandemic hit, and that we thought, oh, that's it, then it's not happening. Montgomery and Wildlife Trust, oh no, it's not happening. Then just under a year later, it was like, okay, yeah, you can do it, but now you're going to go to 2 years. So they madly had to get a team of staff interviewed and in place. There's always the worry, are people going to come? Are people going to refer in? I talked about the importance of having the trust of the participants to bother to complete the scales and talk about the research questions, and then the deliverers themselves, who as I've already said, were integral to this. And there's also some very important practical issues to conducting research in green space, because of course you are outside, aren't you? And it rains and people don't turn up, or people do turn up and they want to take part in what they're doing. They don't want to talk about what they do. They've only got 2.5 hours. They don't want to sit there for 20 minutes and talk about it. They want to get on and do it. And I think one of the very early on when I was researching this area, it gave me quite a good insight. I made some errors. So I was working on a study with people that kept pygmy goats, and I was looking at having this as a hobby and how this benefited them in later life. So I was chuffed because I could go along to some agricultural shows and talk to these people. I thought, oh, you know, what a great gig this is going to be. So I turned up to the Royal Welsh Showground, which is a big showground in Builth Wells, Mid Wales. Went to talk to people and realized they really loved their pygmy goats. They didn't want to leave them. So I thought, oh, great, I'll do some real life. I'll sit next to their pens and talk to them. But the problem with that was in trying to interview them, I had all the background noise of, you know, can the Ronaldsley sheep go to ring 4, please? So that was over the recordings. Then the people were talking to the public. So the next one, which was the Bath and West show, somebody that was organised it had a camper van, so I was able to take them away from their animals. But it is a very practical thing in terms of where you're going to do this research, how, and do people want to buy in? So and anybody involved in these sort of programs, I think there's a lot of early doors work in establishing people's trust. I know, Lorraine, don't you remember, but when we were doing yours, me and Debbie came and work shadowed for a day and just, you know, to really get a sense of, you know, not to be this outsider from a university and, you know, what's all that about. But there's a bit of a whistle-top story about what we do, what we're finding so far. But for me, the most important thing is how are those individuals who are receiving this, what do they say? So I'm going to end with another YouTube clip. I don't know why I was trying to find the word YouTube clip, which hand over to the participants so they can tell us about what they've done.
The Wild Skills, Wild Spaces programme is essentially an ecotherapy programme that supports people who are suffering with their mental health. We provide a space in nature where people can come and enjoy structured activities in the outdoors.
Lots of activities that are therapeutic and outdoors, basically, so anything to do with nature. We do lots of whittling, a lot of green woodwork, cooking, and lots of crafts, anything that's got like a kind of therapeutic outcome. And we take anyone who is 11 up and we just join people together outside and get them to enjoy each other's company and enjoy nature, really.
Could you tell me why you enjoy coming to the Wild Skills, Wild Spaces and what it's done for you?
It gets me out of the house. I'm stuck in the house all day, and this has given me the opportunity to come out and learn things. And it's nature, and with nature you can't go wrong. I really enjoy myself.
If you were going to tell a friend about the programme, what would you tell them?
I'd say it's great for mental health in terms of just, it's relaxing, it's calm. I know, getting your hands dirty and stuff, it's good.
Why do you enjoy coming to the Wild Skills, Wild Spaces?
Because of the people, and because they're not judgmental, so because I have anxiety. And also I don't do the normal things that I do here, so like woodworking I've never done before, so it teaches you like new skills.
Can you tell me why you enjoy coming to these sessions?
I like coming to these sessions because it gets me out of the house, which is my safe place, really. So, and it gives me a positive environment to come out around like-minded people and just have fun, have a laugh, and learn stuff as well. So
I've learned plenty of new skills, like how to light a fire and how to use tools safely, and I just think some great life skills that I can use for years to come.
I can do things that I wouldn't have done, and I could deal with people a lot better.
What would you like to see in the future?
Longer days, longer sessions.
Why would you like to see longer days and longer sessions? What would it mean for you?
Because it means I'd learn more.
it's given me a push in a direction I didn't really expect. But I'm very happy and I'm enjoying it every single bit.
So as usual, those involved can actually articulate it much better than I can. But I hope this gives you a bit of a sense of what me and Debbie doing and why and how, but also of how therapeutic green care can work in action. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much. It was lovely to hear that presentation, and wonderful to hear that you're getting positive responses already. That's a really interesting thing to do and hear. Well, it would be very, you mentioned about, and thank you very much for the comment about being passionate and exciting and wanting to work with things, but I know that that I meet many people like that who are all probably here because they're thinking about what can we do, how can we help, how can we move forward. So it would be really interesting to hear from some of you what you would like to ask or what you think you might be able to do. Now, I noticed in the chat earlier on that there was something about I think there's a question about working with people in high-rise buildings and lots of concrete area, and I wonder if either of you have got any comments you can make on that. We'll start with that question, please.
Shall I go with that, Jen? So, am I unmuted? Just to check.
You are. We're hearing you loud.
Okay, good. I'm quite bad at doing that, talking for ages when I'm muted. I noticed somebody else has mentioned about houseplants, and there is quite a lot of evidence that having houseplants around you and looking and caring for houseplants can have some of these benefits as well. Now, I don't know whether the high-rise flats have any kind of balcony, so that's a potential area in terms of setting up small gardening. Another project that we have been involved in is where we get people to befriend people and help with their garden. But there's a potential a different avenue if people in those flats could maybe get involved in a local community garden if they wanted to do something a little bit bigger than a balcony or a house plant. Would there be anything nearby that they could maybe access, or would the church have any space where they might set up their own community garden that it could be accessed by people? So that would be my first thoughts on that, but there definitely is evidence that having houseplants can have benefits in terms of the climate for your house, in terms of your ecological climate in your house, but also in terms of looking after those plants. And I've got a PhD student who's actually working on the benefits of bringing in nature into offices, and she's looking at how that might help people with their stress. So we'll see what comes out of that.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I noticed another question where Stephen Caddy is asking whether there's some connection with just taking people to another space. And Stephen asks, is it about going into a green space, or actually would there be a significant improvement if you would say take people to a dirty shed to restore a double-decker bus? And the electric light, would the outcomes be the same? Have you any knowledge of that? Do you know anything along those lines?
Oh. Men's sheds.
Yes.
Yes, it's a very successful scheme with lots of positive outcomes. And I would say if these things, it's what suits the person, isn't it? Some people like being outside and like spending their time gardening, and they may not know that until they try it, to be honest. It doesn't mean, you can't encourage people to try something new. But for others, being creative indoors or with mechanics can have similar kinds of benefits. You don't get that kind of extent of view benefit, so you probably don't get that sort of well-being of seeing that view, but you would get the social, the creativity, the self-esteem, those kinds of benefits, and it could be really, really important alternative way. So yeah, any sort of, it fits under what Jenny was talking about, that social prescription, I guess.
Yeah, thanks, Debbie. I think the question was on how do you measure the impact of the green bit as opposed to the social, outdoor and doing bits.
Okay, so you can measure changes in whether people have a change in connectedness to nature using scales to see whether you've actually changed people's feelings of connection to that natural environment. But in terms of whether it's the green bit, that is actually quite a challenge. One of my PhD students is doing, and it usually comes down to experimental work where you manipulate different environments. So she's looking at potentially presenting a natural environment, putting somebody under a degree of stress, showing them slide images of natural environments and then seeing whether the stress reduces, and then maybe showing them something with the sound and the audio, for example, the audio and the image, and then without the audio, and then also comparing that with maybe an urban image. So it would be a sort of, we're only at the level in terms of the evidence of this kind of experimental setting, really, in terms of what is it about the outdoors that is having that benefit. So I think we've still got a long way to go, because like you say, when people do these outdoor activities, you get the same kinds of benefits as somebody doing a creative or an arts sort of benefit. Yeah. So we're still working on that and starting with the experimental kind of avenue. Is that okay?
I noticed also, Stephen, in your question, you asked how do you disentangle the animal elements, and would it be the same if you're in a shed? I mean, there are whole books on measurements for interaction with animals, so things like attachment and the relationship. And again, the sort of experimental work Debbie's had, that they take people into a laboratory, give them very, very complex tasks that actually very few people can work out, and wire them up to measure things like their saliva, so they can measure their cortisol, and then compare people that have a dog in the room and people that don't have a dog in the room. So cortisol is a measurement that can indicate how stressed people are. And they found things like having the dog in the room, people are much calmer doing the same tasks than not. So those sort of things. For the studies with the dogs in prison that we mentioned at the beginning, that was an intervention where in the first study, the dogs actually lived on a wing with offenders who were at risk of being sectioned and self-harm or being bullied on the wing, and we talked to them about what impact the dogs would have, and talked to the staff, because they've got the observations. But there were some measurements of things like reduction in self-harm, because if they're self-harming badly, there's a lot of blood in their cell, the dog wasn't allowed in for health and cleanliness reasons. So but it is very hard to know if you're doing an activity and you're outdoors and which bit is it that's making the impact, isn't it? It's really complex.
Thank you very, very much. I'm very aware of the time. It's been an absolutely fascinating afternoon, and I'm pretty sure, without asking everyone individually, that people have found it quite helpful in some way, and hopefully has set brains and minds thinking about what can we do here, how can we get involved. So a very quick question before I hand over to Caroline to close the meeting is, if people are sitting there thinking this and they're thinking, how do I contact someone like Debbie or Jenny, but they live in they don't live in Wales or in Cardiff, how would they do that? So quick question to you, maybe Jenny, how would somebody sitting here think, how do I ask somebody in my area how I get involved with this?
So I suppose it could literally be as easy as Googling a local university and seeing where researchers are in that area. I mean, what we find is working with people who are working in the area is they've got all the sort of on the ground contacts, if you like, and then the university have got perhaps the skills in the evaluation and what's doing. So we myself and Debbie are always glad when people reach out to us and say, we want to evaluate this, how do we do it? Or we want to, we're looking to get some funding to do this, and evaluation is part of it. So I would say just that as a first port of call. And similarly, people working in those sort of evaluations, sorry, not evaluations, sorry, interventions.
Thank you very, very much indeed. And there are already some lovely comments coming up in our chat for you to read before you go. I'm going to hand over to Caroline. If I can just say to the organising team and to our two presenters, if you could just stay for a couple of minutes when everyone goes, that would be really helpful. Thank you. So Caroline, will you close our meeting for us?
Thank you, Lorraine. And as we just process all that information and how it relates into our own work, but also our understanding of our own well-being as well as everybody else's, just read some words from Psalm 104. From your lofty abode you water the mountains, the earth is satisfied with the fruit of your work. You cause the grass to grow for the cattle and plants for people to use, to bring forth food from the earth, and wine to gladden the human heart. Oil to make the face shine, and bread to strengthen the human heart. The trees of the Lord are watered abundantly, the cedars of Lebanon that he planted. In them the birds build their nest, the stork has its home in the fir trees. The high mountains are for the wild goats, the rocks are a refuge for the conies. You have made the moon to mark the seasons, the sun knows its time for setting. You make darkness and it is night, when all the animals of the forest can creeping out. O Lord, how manifold are your works. In wisdom you have made them all, the earth is full of your creatures. Yonder is the sea great and wide, creeping things innumerable are there, living things both great and small. May the glory of the Lord endure forever. May the Lord rejoice in his works, who looks on the earth and it trembles, who touches the mountains and they smoke. I will sing to the Lord as long as I live. I will sing praise to my God while I have being. May my meditation be pleasing to him, for I rejoice in the Lord. And so we give thanks to God for our time together, for all that has been ignited in our own minds. And as we go forward in the rest of the day, may we know of your presence beside us, that always your spirit is with us. In the name of Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen. So as we leave our time, just to say there will be an email coming out, and then in a couple of days the recording will come out, and then about news about a conference that we're linking up with as Positively Rural and the Diocese of York on food. So that's the second Saturday in October, but there'll be news coming out about that. And just enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you for joining us. And thank you to Jenny and Debbie for all that they've shared with us. It's been absolutely fascinating to hear all that information. So thank you and farewell, and God bless your time together.
Thank you. Bye-bye.